Do you think Sun Tzu's The Art of War is about fighting? You're mistaken, because that book is actually about not fighting. More precisely, it is about managing the cost of war, because Sun Tzu knew that no empire is defeated by enemy weapons, but by the moment its treasury runs dry. And this is exactly where the story I will tell you today begins. The real bill of wars is never issued on the battlefield. The real bill is sent to your wallet, to your grocery basket, to the purchasing power slowly melting away in your bank account. And the worst part is that you often cannot even name what is happening, because its name is inflation. And inflation is the most successful illusionist in history. Now I want to ask you a question, but I want you to think about the answer honestly. How do states finance wars? By raising taxes? Number. If a government openly asked you to pay the real cost of a war, you would never allow that war to happen. This is one of history's dirtiest secrets. Wars are almost never financed with the explicit consent of the public. There are only two ways to do it: borrowing or inflating the money supply. In other words, quietly eroding the value of money from the inside, just like the Romans did. In the 2nd century AD, the borders of the Roman Empire had expanded so much, and the appetite of its army had grown so large that the treasury could no longer carry the burden. The solution the emperors found was both clever and insidious. They gradually reduced the actual silver content of the coin, called the denarius. In 64 AD, during the reign of Nero, this coin contained about 90% silver. By the middle of the 3rd century, the silver content had fallen to less than 5%. The coin in your hand looked the same, had the same name, but its inside had been hollowed out and its value destroyed. And the most tragic part was that the Roman citizen waking up each morning could not notice this change because it was designed to be gradual, subtle, and deliberate, just like what central banks do today. History does not repeat itself, but it often rhymes. And the period we are living in rhymes so strongly with Rome's darker eras that it can send chills down your spine. Think about Afghanistan. From 2001 to 2021, the United States fought a war there for 20 years. According to Brown University's Costs of War project, the total bill of that war was approximately $2.3 trillion. But here is the question we must ask. How much of that was paid through taxes? Almost none. The vast majority of the bill was financed through government bonds, meaning debt. In other words, the money did not come from today's Americans, but from future Americans, even those who have not yet been born. And when that debt is eventually repaid, if it is repaid at all, it will be paid either through higher taxes or through more money creation. In both cases, the bill ultimately comes out of the purchasing power of ordinary people. Do you know who clearly articulated this mechanism for the first time? Adam Smith. Yes, that Adam Smith, the man often called the father of modern capitalism, the theorist of the invisible hand, the thinker who supposedly championed free markets above all else. But the uncomfortable truth is that Adam Smith did not believe in many of the ideas that are now defended in his name. For Smith, the greatest threat to free markets was not governments, but monopolies created by corporations and powerful interest groups. When it came to military spending, he issued a very clear warning in The Wealth of Nations. States that finance wars through debt are collecting a hidden tax from their citizens, and that tax is called inflation. At this point, I need to tell you about an invisible network, because this borrowing mechanism does not operate on its own. There is an entire ecosystem that designs it, feeds it, and protects it. In Washington, D.C., London, and Brussels, there are dozens of think tanks: Brookings Institution, Rand Corporation, Atlantic Council. Inside rooms that are not democratic, not elected, and not accountable to the public, these institutions gather and effectively manufacture economic policies, defense budgets, and Middle East strategies. When you examine the sponsors funding these organizations, you often find arms manufacturers, energy companies, and large conglomerates that benefit from the war economy. If a report states that the United States must maintain a military presence in the region to protect its interests, It is not difficult to observe how the stock price of the sponsoring defense contractor rises shortly afterward. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is a documented reality of conflicts of interest operating within a system lacking full transparency. Now turn your eyes to the Middle East. Since the early 2000s, when you add up US military spending in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, and also the military aid provided to Israel, the total exceeds $8 trillion. 8 trillion. It is such an enormous number that it is difficult to grasp. To make it more concrete, if you spent $1 every second, it would take more than 250,000 years to spend that amount. So where does this money come from? The Federal Reserve buys government bonds. To purchase those bonds, it creates digital money. That money enters the financial system, expanding the supply of dollars and slowly eroding the dollar's purchasing power. This process is called quantitative easing. But behind this technical term lies something much simpler and much harsher: money creation. And the cost of this monetary expansion is not paid by investors on Wall Street. It is paid by ordinary people whose savings quietly melt away in Istanbul, Lagos, Buenos Aires. The Ottoman Empire fell into a similar trap. In the 19th century, particularly after the Crimean War, the Ottoman treasury sank into deep debt. European banks extended high-interest loans, and when the empire could no longer repay them, the Ottoman Public Debt Administration was established in 1881. From that moment on, the empire's tax revenues were directly transferred to foreign creditors. The financial dimension of sovereignty had collapsed, and the political collapse soon followed. Look at Greece today. Look at Argentina. Look at every country struggling to maintain defense spending above 3% of GDP. The rhyme continues. And this is where we must remember the great 14th century thinker, Ibn Khaldun. 700 years ago, he described the same pattern with crystal clarity. As states grow, their armies grow. As armies grow, spending grows. As spending grows, taxes increase. As taxes increase, the productive classes weaken or flee. The economy shrinks, and the empire begins to rot from within. He called this the dissolution of asabiya, the erosion of social cohesion and productive vitality. Al-Ghazali went even further. For him, money was a moral instrument, a symbol of trust. A society that disconnects money from its moral compass, where wealth is no longer generated through production, but through debt and speculation, begins to decay from the inside. And that decay is moral before it is economic. When you look at the modern financial system today, Al-Ghazali's warning seems strikingly relevant. In 1929, corporate share buybacks were illegal because they were seen as market manipulation. Today, companies in the United States spend trillions of dollars every year on share buybacks. Through this form of legal manipulation, executives inflate short-term earnings figures, increase the value of their stock options, and ultimately weaken the long-term productive capacity of their companies. Yet the connection between these outcomes is rarely explained clearly in mainstream media or evening news broadcasts. And this is not accidental. Today, I will not speak about the Israel-Palestine conflict itself, because it is a deeply complex humanitarian tragedy with many political dimensions. But I will ask a question. How does the approximately $3.8 billion in annual US military aid to Israel affect the defense companies that profit from the continuation of conflict? Look at the stock prices of Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, General Dynamics during periods when tensions escalate. Read the numbers yourself. This is not an accusation. It is a question. And in a healthy democracy, asking such questions is both a right and a duty. You might be thinking right now, these are issues of great powers. What do they have to do with me? And that thought is exactly what the system wants from you. As long as you remain within that mindset, you will never see how large the bill really is. If you want to understand why inflation has become such a structural problem today, why it directly affects your grocery basket, why energy prices are shaped not just by economic decisions, but by global military dynamics, then you cannot ignore the financing mechanisms behind wars. You live inside a global financial system. The rules of that system are written in Washington, Frankfurt, and London. But the bill is paid by you. Now let me ask you a real question. Why do wars never end? Because for them to end, the people and industries profiting from them would have to stop making money. And in history, no profitable sector has ever voluntarily shrunk. But history teaches us one more thing. Knowledge can become a weapon. If the ordinary Roman citizen had understood that the silver inside his denarius was slowly disappearing, perhaps he would have made different choices. Now you understand. And a person who understands is a person who has awakened. But awakening requires acting differently. Because the most dangerous person in any system is not the one who understands and remains silent, but the one who understands and speaks.
If you find this video interesting, please like and subscribe to discover more.